Good evening, BGC Book Club fam. Come on in the room. Let us know that you're here, where you're joining us from. I am super excited to be back with you after a week off. Some were celebrating the holidays, some were just happy to have a day off, whatever the case may be. But it is good to be back with you again and to have another wonderful Black woman writer with us on this wonderful Monday evening if you're watching live or whatever time you're checking in. So as you come in the room, as always, if you don't mind dropping in the comments to let us know where you're joining us from so that we just kind of know who's here and who's going to be a part of this great conversation. So for those of you who may not have been in this space before, my name is Marcy Thomas. I am the founder of Brown Girl Collective and the BGC Book Club, which is just over a couple of years old. And a matter of fact, Brown Girl Collective itself just turned 13 last week. So we are celebrating all things wonderful, beautiful, brown slash black women and all the wonderful things that we're doing. And this space is just what that is all about. Books that are by, for, and about us. So tonight I am super excited because I get to talk about something that marries two things that I love. You can't see it over here, but I have an old school record player over here because I love music. I've always been a lover of music, and this book that we're going to talk about combines two things that I love: books and music. So I want to go ahead and announce our guest for the evening. We have with us Ashley M Coleman, who is a freelance writer and music industry executive who describes herself as a little literary and a little hip hop. While working in the music industry for more than 10 years, she also wrote for Essence.com, The Cut, Apartment Therapy, and Grammy.com, among others. Her passion, whether working with music makers or writers from marginalized communities, is in creating safe gathering spaces and providing educational opportunities for creatives. And in that vein, in 2017, she launched a community for Black writers and writers of color entitled Permission to Write, which we'll talk about a little later. She's also the co-host of the podcast 8296, a native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She's currently living in LA with her husband. So without any further delay, welcome to the space, Ashley M. Coleman. Welcome, Ashley.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me, Marcy. I'm excited.
Oh, yes, so am I. And this is the book we'll be talking about today. Good Morning, Love. So,
Yes.
her, and here's my copy that I read through over the weekend. I really enjoyed reading it, and it's been picked up as a good summer read, a nice romance, all of those things. So, congratulations to you, Ashley.
Oh, thank you so much.
So before we get into details about the book, tell us a little bit about your journey, because as I mentioned in your bio, you've worked in the music industry as well as being a writer. So just tell us a little bit about how you got from one space into this new space.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm one of those folks who has definitely been a writer all my life. So my mom definitely was an avid reader. She would take me to the library all the time, and I would have my library card, get my little books, and check them out. And so for me, I just feel like writing has always been a passion. I kind of would write little creative stories in the journals that my mom would also buy me. I've been a journaler for a long time, my little fifth grade self kind of writing about the day at school and all those things. And so for me, it was kind of just trying to figure out the avenue that I wanted to write. And so part of that really started in music for me. So because I was always a good writer, people kind of tried to steer me in the direction of journalism. So I started out as a journalism major at Drexel University. And then I was like, I don't want to do news. Like, this is not, what I actually want to do. I want to make things up. I want to have creative language. And so I started dabbling around actually writing music, much like the main character in Good Morning Love. But somewhere along the way, I started blogging. Which was more nonfiction writing. And that really started my journey into kind of writing for an audience. And I was always simultaneously transitioning into the executive side of music, so working behind the scenes in music, but then I was writing the whole time, kind of in linear fashion, just while I was really doing both. And you mentioned it mixing like both of your worlds, like
Right.
writing and music are just my favorite things. And so I feel so fortunate that I'm able to do both.
Right. And that's such a blessing because I'm going to tell my age a little bit. When I was growing up, one of the things that I loved to read was Right On magazine. I don't know if you've ever even seen
Yes,
a
I've heard
magazine.
of Right On magazine. It used to be in the supermarket.
Right, right. Back in the day when Michael Jackson would be in there and the Silvers and all these groups in the 70s and 80s. And I loved Right On magazine. And Cynthia Horner, who was the publisher, was like the youngest publisher at the time, youngest Black female publisher. And it was just great. I loved reading those stories, learning about the musical artists and stuff like that. So, I'm a little bit jealous of you because you had a chance to actually kind of work in that field. So,
Yes.
well, one of the things, just getting into the story itself, I love your main character, Carli. She's really, she's really an outstanding young artist, who is, even though it's not necessarily a coming of age story, she is kind of sort of coming of age and figuring out who she is. So give us a little background about Carli and where she is at this space in the story.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I absolutely think it's a coming of age story. I know oftentimes we kind of make that synonymous with more like young adult or like teenage kind of stories. But, one of the things that I found is that your 20s really is still coming of age, in a
Right.
lot of ways. I'm even in my 30s now and I feel like I'm still coming of age, right? So, that's really where Carli is. She's in this space, kind of how we talked about off mic, between like the job and the dream, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to me, so many millennials find themselves in that space. They want to do work to survive, because we live in a society where you need cash and capital and things to kind of make life go. But I think that we've been fortunate enough as a generation to realize like there's something else, and that there's something more that we can do. And so that's really where we find Carli when the story starts, kind of trying to figure out navigating both her professional career. And I think like what makes it interesting too is that she's good at it, so it's like, I think it makes it an even harder kind of decision for her to figure out which way to go, because she could easily just rise up the corporate ladder. But it's like that nagging feeling that there's more, that there's something that she's just a bit more passionate about that will kind of take her life where she wants it to be.
Right, and you're right. No matter what your age, that's something that you can deal with. Because a lot, especially nowadays, you see a lot of people who may have, they have like a day job, and sometimes the job that they have coincides with what they really dream of, and sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
Sometimes it is what it is. It's just a check in some cases. So I guess in that regard, Carli is fortunate because at least she's working in the field that she loves.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. And with a boss who she really admires,
Mm-hmm.
and is learning from. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
she's fortunate in that way.
She's fortunate in that way, but yet and still she has this big dream. and I say her side hustle that she is, basically, and this isn't you, if you've never watched before, we don't give spoilers, so there won't be spoilers, but just enough for you to know what the story is about. When she's not working in her day job, she is a music writer, a producer, even a bit of a performer. So now, since there are some parallels to your life, and you mentioned that you write, is that something that you did as well?
So not performed. I think one of the things that I've learned is that I'm
Okay.
good with words. So kind of in my journey
Right.
of, doing some creative stuff on the writing side, it was always more for me about the words and the story and
Mhm.
content. And I was working with other people who were really great at like melody and how things sounded and singing and things like that. So Carli's a little more multifaceted than I ever was. But I think that for me, it was really important to showcase just a female, like a strong female protagonist that kind of not only had like outward front facing talent, but also kind of just behind the scenes. Because sometimes I feel like that gets overlooked a lot in the music industry. We're constantly striving for more representation for women in a male dominated field like music. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think adding these elements of to Carli was like she was a triple threat, you know, like she was coming to the table with a lot, being a musician, being a songwriter, also having that performance thing under her belt as well. So I don't know, it was exciting for me just to be able to hopefully showcase to other women like just their space and that they're important within the musical landscape, and that I see them, you know, because I do get to work with a lot of majorly talented women in my work,
Mm-hmm.
in music. And so it was a bit of an ode to them of like, I see you in all the hard work that you put forth.
Right, because one thing, as you were mentioning that, one person popped in my head, Sylvia Rome, for
Yes.
example.
Mm-hmm. Yes, who's like a powerhouse in the industry.
Right, right, and there are others, but that's just who popped in my head immediately. Suzanne DePass was one from Motown, you know,
Yes.
and it's amazing. And Carly deals with some of those issues as well because it's like you're a woman, and like in a lot of spaces, if they're male dominated, people expect you to be in a certain place or a certain space, or you can only go so far, or
Mm-hmm.
perhaps your talents aren't recognized or appreciated as much as they are, or people feel, men feel that they can mistreat you because of, okay, well, you want to get to this level, so you have to do these things to get to this level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like to me, like I always think like talent is what can surpass all that. I'm just a believer in that, and maybe sometimes that sounds a little naive to people, but I believe that like when you come to the table and like your talent is undeniable, I just think like cream rises to the top, and no matter how many obstacles might get put in your way, I know that like great talent and hard work really speaks for itself. You know, at the
Mhm.
end of the day, even with the obstacles that we see like even Carli face in the book, just knowing that she could always fall back on her talent and the fact that she was not going to let anybody kind of knock her off of what she really saw for herself.
And that's one thing I love about her, because she showed the different sides that sometimes we have. Because on the one hand, she's very confident and she's like, no, I'm not going to let you mistreat me. But on the other hand, she still deals with something that many times we deal with, and that's that imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's something so prevalent, I feel like, especially when we come from certain environments. Like I'm from Philadelphia. I'm from a urban city where to me, like there were not a lot of people that were doing the things that I saw for myself in my life,
Mhm.
and to be where I am kind of, working for like a very premier music organization and then also like writing books. Like I read a lot of books, but I didn't know anybody who was writing them, and so you find those quiet moments, where you're kind of like, am I good enough? Like, what even like brought me here? Like, how am I even here? Because so many people that are from the same spaces that I'm from would never get these opportunities, and I think specifically as Black women, as women of color, we're always kind of having that little question,
Mhm.
and it's so annoying because it's
It
like
is.
we are just like so awesome. We're like kicking butt and taking names, but still, I find myself encouraging so many of my friends that are doing amazing things, and they're like, oh, it's not that great. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? You are doing amazing, amazing things. And so I think that that's what will make Carli relatable, because it's almost like in the moments where she's most confident, it's just because she knows she can't let people see her sweat. And a
Right.
lot of times we have to put that brave face on, but then, we might do our thing and then go in the bathroom and be like, oh,
Right.
I can't believe I
Woo!
did that. Yeah. Take
Right.
that deep breath.
That is so true. And then also her roommate, Taya, is
Yes.
going through something similar in her career as well.
Yeah, I felt like Talia. First of all, I love Talia because she is just that like ride or die homegirl that so many of us have. And she's really fighting against in a different realm, trying to make sure that she's being seen, for her work, being in law school, trying to really make herself stand out, and dealing with some of the pressures that come in academia. And so I thought it was pretty cool, kind of that juxtaposition of like, Carli was in this creative career and Talia was in a more formidable path, you know, but that there's a lot of similarities in what they were trying to accomplish and how they were trying to be seen.
Absolutely. And I mean, just as Black women, you know, specifically, Black women specifically, but, you know, women of color, women in general, a lot of times these are the things that we're dealing with because, you know, you go into spaces where you may be, a couple of weeks ago, I talked to a young lady who wrote a book called First and Only. You might be the first, you might be the only in a certain space, you know, and there are certain hoops that you have to jump through or expectations that people may have of you or not, you know, think that you're capable of just because. So, you know, that's something that's very real, and it was good to see that. One of the things I also enjoyed with Carli and her day job, that she had a really good mentor.
Yes. You know, I think sometimes the thing I love about fiction is that you can kind of like write about the things you wish to see, you know? And so I feel like I've had some really great, specifically like women and male mentors in my music career, but I felt a struggle trying to find that in my writing career. So it was a lot easier for me in music. Reason, maybe because it's a bit more of a collaborative process. Like you kind of need other people, you need the producer, you need the songwriter. So I felt like it gave me a lot more opportunities to really meet those people that had wisdom, that were older than me, that were, you know, just had experience, that they could really help me navigate. I mean, one of those male mentors being one who was even just helping me navigate, you know, the interpersonal relationships of being a woman, you know, and being like, look, this is what it is, you know, and laying it out like that. That was an important kind of thing for me to know early on in that process. And so, yeah, but I really struggled with that in writing. You know, I just didn't really have a mentor in a lot of writing things. I was just kind of figuring out for myself. So I feel like in working on the book, I feel like I was almost trying to write that into fruition. Was just this kind of strong figure in Carli's life, you know, that was really helping her steer in her direction. But, you know, we also see where sometimes there's a rub, you know, between what she thinks is best and what Carli thinks is best for her life, you know. And I think that's a very real interaction that sometimes comes with people who really want the best for us, but maybe can't see the same vision.
Right, because I mean, just thinking about, you know, age differences and things like that, or, you know, different life experiences, is that sometimes, I guess, someone who may be a little older or seasoned is like looking at, okay, this is the way it is. This is the path, the way that it was laid out. This is the way it's supposed to go. This is how you become successful. Wherein nowadays, younger generations, you know, are able to say, well, no, maybe I can go, instead of going straight, maybe I can go here and go here, and, you know, I can do things a lot differently. And sometimes it's hard for the person who's older or more seasoned to see, well, that way could work as well. You know, there's more than one way to reach the end goal, you know. So, and I think that that's, you know, one of the things that kind of played a part in that, you know, of course, you know, being protective of someone that you care about, that's a piece of it as well. But then, you know, sometimes it's just, hey, there's more than one way to get there.
Absolutely.
And now, speaking of Tao, we haven't talked about him yet. He is the love interest, and because this is a love story,
yes,
he's a love interest and also an artist as well. So, what was kind of the inspiration for his character?
Sure. So, you know, the funny thing about this whole story was really, it kind of started with a question. I feel like as writers, we're always questioning, you know, I think especially kind of balancing this fact that I do have some journalism training and like have the creative side. And so much of journalism is rooted in just the questions we want to ask, right? About like what's happening in the world. And so a lot of that I feel like feeds into fiction as well. And so one of the questions I was really asking myself was what happens when the playboy falls in love? You know, I listen to a ton of music. It's an occupational hazard. In addition to the fact that I like music too, but I also like kind of have to listen to a lot of music as well. But yeah, I just was listening to a lot of like male R&B artists and being like, yeah, what happens when this gets old? Because you know, there's a certain appeal to being a sex symbol, being, you know, accessible to so many women and all this stuff, but like what happens when someone really grabs your heart, you know, and you're kind of ready for something different. And that was kind of the onus behind starting this story. Now, the interesting part about it is I could have maybe wrote it from Tao's perspective, but somehow Carli erected in that, you know, to really be our main protagonist. So that's kind of how Tao came about. It was like just listening to a bunch of stuff and saying like, okay, like what happens after this when you're kind of tired of the whole bad boy, I'm so cool lifestyle, you know? And it was fun to kind of see that journey, because I feel like there's almost a whole implied life prior to the book starting of Tao's journey, you know, and getting him to the point that he was at.
Right. And that's so true. We talked about this a little bit. I always call it in the brown room. We talked about that a little bit, about how, you know, when an artist, you know, first really hits, they, a lot of times images and personas and things are crafted for this person. And, you know, that may or may not even be who they really are.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is what, you know, and unfortunately, a lot of times we see in the music industry, or even I would say probably in books as well, is that when people see something that sells, not everybody wants to do the same thing or a similar thing, whether it really suits that person or not. And the person who's looking to, you know, be successful and use their talents or whatever, they may go along with it even initially, but you know, find that it can be a challenge when they want to make a change.
Well, it's such a balance, right? So even when you think of something like publishing, you know, everything that's published is not necessarily only because it was the best writing ever, right? Like writing is a product. There's a market, right? So sometimes there's things that are faring well in the market, you know, something might be big. And so that's how those things get pushed to the forefront. And there's so many parallels in music, just the same, you know, whereas like, we want to have this purity of like the art and what it means, but it's also a product that needs to be sold. And so I think there's constantly a reckoning kind of between those things, because creativity is something that's so intimate, so personal. It's like terrifying to put things out like an album or even a book, you know. You're just like, oh my gosh, this thing that's so precious to me is out in the world, you know. But it's the balance of just knowing like, okay, I have to be creative, but I also have to make this successful. And so it was fun to kind of dive into that with Tao's character, and Carli really being like a support in that, after she gets over kind of even just her own prejudgments, you know, of who she thinks he is.
Right. Who she thinks he is, who other people are telling her that he is, you know, it's a lot, you know, when you meet a person, because as you say, you just have this persona, and sometimes some of that stuff is true.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, but in this case, this is an artist. Tao is evolving, you know, and becoming, you know, more of the person that he has evolved into. One of the things that I found interesting in the story was just, you know, well, number one, him deciding that, we saw this a lot a couple of years ago with George Floyd and some of the other things that happened, that you started to see more and more artists speaking up or speaking out, actually in the last few years, but, you know, that was a big year for that. You know, and him, you know, wanting to do some things along that nature as well, becoming more socially active and socially, you know, aware, and how, you know, experience a little bit of pushback.
Ooh, because it's tough. It's like when you're starting out, you know, your goal is really broad appeal. and you don't want to be turning people off left and right, like,
Mhm.
and so as much as it's a human right and you feel like everyone should understand that, right, like be like, oh, this is wrong, this isn't something that should be happening and we should speak up about it. It's like the world is so big and people have such polarizing opinions towards things like, well, what did he do? And, if you just comply with the police and, there's
Mhm.
all these different things that people can kind of conjure up about what's right and what's wrong, And so I feel like it's hard thing, even like speaking up about things and then it being misconstrued,
Right.
things can kind of go left really quickly, and the court of public opinion is fast and it has no nuance.
Mhm.
And so, I think one of the things that artists really have to kind of grapple with is kind of like getting to a stage where they can say more. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? When they've already built the audience, when they've already sold the records, it's like Beyonce can do what she
Right.
wants now.
That's
You know
who.
what I
That's what
mean?
I was thinking about, Beyonce.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but it takes a lot of time, to get to that
Mhm.
space where you're not gonna lose partnerships or brand deals, or where people are not gonna burn your albums because they don't agree with an opinion or whatever the case
Right.
may be. So yeah, it's just so hard trying to navigate that space. But I like that, he was having more autonomy over who he wanted to be, and being able to show that growth.
Mm-hmm. And it was nice to see him working with Carli, and them coming together and collaborating really in both ways. And that was one of the things, speaking to the love interest part of the story, and not just what they did as a career, but I like the fact that they were able to work together in multiple ways,
Mm-hmm.
and form a partnership. And, of course, people aren't always necessarily working in the same field or whatever, like they were. But I always think that it's powerful when you can see a couple come together and actually be able to be a support, to one another, and be able to, elevate each other's lives and careers and in that way. So I thought that was a powerful way to have them, work together.
Well, it's so important because, even my husband is a creative as well, right? So my husband is a music producer. And so one of the things that he expressed very early on was like he never saw healthy relationships kind of within
Mm.
music, right? He was just like, it's crazy. There's all types of stuff that's always happening. So I just never thought I would be like in a healthy relationship, doing what I do. But part of the onus to that was him beginning to meet some of those people, right? So one of his best friends, who's like a major MD and does stuff all over with all types of artists, like, he got married, and he was like, yeah,
Mhm.
I just fly her out with me. We do things together, like, whatever the
Mhm.
case may be. And so he just started to see more and more examples of that. And so we're really fortunate that we have like some really amazing creative couples, right? Like that both do things. They might not be in the same exact field,
Right.
but they, one might be an artist, one might be an event planner, one might be a DJ, whatever the case may be. But, just being able to see like, this is something you can do, because entertainment is not really like, so normal of a
Right,
thing,
right.
you
Not like a
know?
9 to 5.
Exactly. Sometimes my husband is gone for weeks at a time, and it's like, that's a thing that you have to navigate. But, I think it's really important to really have those examples. And I hope that for Carli and Tal, that they're a bit of like a fictional example of saying like you don't have to sacrifice love
Right,
for work, because I think
right.
a lot of people in creative careers sometimes do think, oh, I'm never going to find anybody that I can really settle down with.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that makes a lot of sense. And in Carli's case, and I mean, and this is in the beginning of the book, she's following her father's footsteps, who was a musician, and there were challenges. So maybe from her perspective, it's like, I don't know, because of what she saw happening in her own life. So yeah, I mean that happens, and it's good that she was able to meet someone and be able to start to build something and do things in a little bit of a different way.
For sure. And yes, that is absolutely why she is like, no, thank you.
Right,
I'm
right,
not interested. This is
right.
a bad idea, for sure. Her dad kind of, I thought the relationship with her dad was interesting because he's also simultaneously her hero at the same
Mm-hmm,
time.
mm-hmm.
But they definitely have a strained relationship at the same time. And so I just liked being able to kind of show just both sides.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was good to see that, and to, and even him, his apprehension, like, man, you're in the field. Well, but then I guess you understand
Yeah.
because you are in the field. So yes.
Right. Right. Like him being like, no, like, I want better almost for my daughter.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that was good to see as well. Now I'm just making sure I'm hit all the high points that I wanted to hit. I think I have most of them. Now, one is just about Carli, because we mentioned this is a coming of age for her. And of course, without telling all of the story, she does come to a point where she has to make some decisions about what she wants to do. Does she want to stay on this, corporate executive trajectory and keep rising, rising, rising? Or does she want to, take a chance on life and love and herself and do
Mhm.
something a little bit different? We're not going to tell you which one she chose, but she does come to a point of having to make a decision. Um, how was that for you in writing that part of the story? Just her having to make that type of choice.
It's so interesting because I think a lot about Issa Rae, and who is somebody
Mm.
I really admire as a TV writer, and how, you know, and she talks a lot about how she never thought Lawrence was going to make it past the first season. Like,
Mm.
she thought that was like done. And so what I love about things like storytelling, like TV, like film, is that like sometimes you don't know what's happening until it's happening, and it's almost like these characters kind of begin to take a life of their own. And so you might know the direction that you want to go, but then you're kind of like, but what if we did this, and how would she choose this? I feel like there's a small love triangle,
Right,
that
right,
happens,
right.
right? And so, she's in this moment of, even with that, like, okay, this other thing feels like so much more of a no-brainer, so
Mm-hmm.
something that makes sense kind of in my world, versus this absolutely not sure bet.
Right.
And so to me, it was just about kind of being as true to the character as possible, and kind of like letting Carli lead the way, essentially, of what I feel like she would have done.
Well, that brings up another question. So you may have had a path, because you already mentioned that listening to the music and Tao was kind of what was in the forefront of your mind, but then Carli kind of took over. So in your writing, did that kind of happen with the way the story ended, or did you begin with an end in mind?
So I definitely began with an end in mind. So I knew that there was going to be a shift of Carli going from one place to another. That's what I knew. But how she got there, I think, kind of came together as like the story really progressed. So yeah, that was like a fun thing. But I just knew that there would be this kind of just like huge transition, and it's so funny because I ended up making a huge transition in the
Right.
same way,
Mm-hmm.
but it was after I had written the book. So it
Mm-hmm.
was interesting to see, like, kind of life imitate the art, I guess. So yeah, I wanted to kind of her to just be uprooted,
Mm-hmm.
from everything, that really had become like, not not in a bad way, like her foundation, but also her comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of what it looks like to break out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
As a creative who works with creatives, and we'll get into that in a few minutes,
Yeah.
do you think that that's something that helps the creative to be a person to break out of the comfort zone and do something different, whether it be a move or any type of shift that needs to make? Do you find that that allows creatives to expand and grow.
Absolutely. I was not very like well traveled as a younger person. I kind of like did the up and down 95 thing. When you live in Philly, you
Right.
understand. You're like, you'll go to New York, you go to DC, you go to like Virginia, you kind of do a little 95 tour. But it wasn't until, I think I had like finished college that I actually just started going other places, like, going to just like Puerto Rico or like places in the Caribbean, or like even flying across the country to LA for work, right? Like for different work things once I was working in the music industry. And absolutely, like just being in a plane literally like opens my mind up. I feel like I think about things in a plane that I probably never would think about on the ground, right? Like, to me, like being in a plane is almost like when I feel God is the most real. I'm like, this is insane. Like we are, we are
Right?
suspended
You're like, what
in
is
the
yeah.
air, right? So I absolutely think like your environment, things that you're around, like, it doesn't mean you always have to uproot your life per se,
Right.
but I do think that like being around different people is so inspiring, just kind of like mining the different conversations, and mining different cultures and how people view things. Like I just think it's so instrumental to the artist, whether you're writing or whether you're making music or whatever the case may be. That's why a lot of people, you'll see, they go record albums in Hawaii or they go record albums in the Bahamas, just because a lot of times we are writing based on kind of what we see. What are we going out and seeing every day? What are we experiencing every day? And so to keep some of that creativity alive, I feel like it's important to like experience something else, from
Right.
time to time if you can.
Right. And I'm thinking, even if you can't travel, think of the people like who live in New York but never see New York. They have
Right.
their block.
Right.
Everything is within the block or within that radius. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole lot of world. I mean, and not to say that there aren't stories within those spaces, but,
Mm-hmm.
just having an expansive view, or even if it's just trying a different type of food, whatever it is,
Yes. Yes.
exploring, the five senses, you know.
Even reading different types of books, like sometimes we get stuck in one genre, that's one thing that we like, but I like to try to branch out and read romance or read literary fiction or read some sci-fi, right? Like it just expands your mind.
Right. And it's funny that you mentioned that. So we talked about it a little bit before that, since I've been doing the book club, I've been across a lot of genres, and sometimes people like some, they don't like others. I have found that, I have fallen in love with historical fiction.
Oh, nice.
And doing this, but I do also love other genres as well. Like I never
Mhm.
was a mystery reader. Like I like mystery or suspense and things like that. So yeah, I mean, reading widely, because you can travel the whole world, just from your library. So that, I think
Absolutely.
that's a powerful thing. So, well, we hit most of the highlights on the story. I just suggest everybody go ahead and read it. It's a nice summer romance, a good read, and I think you all will enjoy the characters in the story. But I did want to shift gears a little bit, because as I have scrolling at the bottom, permission to write. So not
Yes.
only do you write, you
Mhm.
also help others in their writing journey. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do there, or what prompted you to start that.
Sure. So I guess taking it back to the mentorship piece,
Mhm.
because I was having such a hard time finding my own mentor in writing, I felt like we could peer mentor, right? So
Mhm.
that we could just bring together a community of people that might not have been like above or beneath each other, but even if we were on the same level, that we could kind of just help and encourage each other through the process. And so
Mhm.
Permission to Write really started from that place of just kind of wanting to create an online community for writers to get together. And so the work that we do is really centered around, I always say like amplifying and cultivating the voices of Black writers and writers of color. And really what that means is just like amplifying them by giving them spaces, right? So whether it's writing on a blog or writing for our newsletter or whatever the case may be, just giving opportunities where we can, and then cultivating through things like our mentorship program, like our master classes, and our permission granted membership community, which is like our paid membership community. So we have like a monthly kind of community that gets together. We have a Slack channel and weekly newsletters and writing opportunities and things like that. So it's just a multifaceted way to kind of like create community. I know when I was still in Philly, I had an in-person writing group that met through Permission to Write, and like they really helped me workshop a lot of the beginning of the book, and even like my query letter when I was looking for an agent. So having a community of writers is just invaluable, and so I wanted to make space for that because I'm just that person. Like I like to do the things that I want to see.
Right. The change that you want to see. Absolutely.
I really do. So I just wanted to make the space that I was looking for.
I think that's really powerful that to do that, because you mentioned earlier on you didn't have certain things. So instead of begrudging the fact that you didn't have, or to say, well, I didn't have it, so nobody else should have it either. You're like, no, let me see if I can create community for other writers who might be looking for the same thing, and I do think that's important to learn, to grow out through another platform. I've taken some writing classes, and I see that you have one coming up soon that I'm interested in about book reviews and things like that. But because one thing that is an advantage, I guess, that in the years past that we may not have had, number one, you can start your own blog if you just want to write. Start your own blog, or go on Medium or some of these other platforms where you can write and get your name out there and allow people to see what you're doing. But then also to work with others and who are building platforms to give you that space as well. I think that's just really powerful.
Right. No, absolutely. And it just will take you so far, just because writing is really hard because you just do it. But it's normally just you and the computer or your notepad and your pen, however you prefer to attack it. And so there's so much value in like the moments where we're able to like get together and say like, I'm struggling with this, or how do I approach revision, or, how do I work with an editor, or how do I get my book deal? What's a good advance, right? Like, how do I know what I should be asking for? All these things that, I share very openly with my community, because, so much of this publishing journey has just been kind of like learning on the job. And so as an avid learner, I love learning things and like being able to share it with other people so that they have the knowledge moving forward too.
Well, that's good. And thank you so much for doing that. And I definitely will continue to follow. And like I said, I have to check my schedule, probably jump in that class, because it's just always good to, have an opportunity to learn and look for ways to expand and grow. So, of course, I know right now you are focused on the promotion for Good Morning Love. Are there any specific places where we can be on the lookout for you?
So Good Morning Love is happening. It's chugging along. There's all types of different virtual things popping up. I don't have anything right now on the calendar. I think we're doing something in Redondo Beach, California in August. But things are coming up. So just if you follow all the social platforms, you'll see them. I try to share everything kind of as they come. But there's been some really great things. Like we were in Atlanta for the Refinery 29 Glow Up event.
I missed you.
Oh, you were there? Oh.
No, I missed you. I didn't go, so I
hate okay. Yeah, and then I just came back from the ALA annual conference, which is the librarians conference that happened in Washington, D.C. So I've been all around, and it's been exciting just talking with different groups. But I've been full force just trying to tell as many people as possible. As a debut author, it's like it's all about just getting your name out there. There's a lot of people who really have the summer romance space on lock. And so, you're always kind of knocking at the door saying like, hey, like there's some other voices here too. So
All right. Well, we're glad that you have shared your voice with us. So I know, are there any other books in the works right now? Or I know a lot of times by the time one is done and you're promoting it, you're already halfway through the next one.
And God bless those people. God bless those people who are announcing like the next book when they're promoting the one that's happening. For me, I have some projects that are really in the infancy stages. So they're not really ready or off to go or have any like upcoming dates, but I am working. And who knows if maybe there's more to Carli and Tal's story, right? Like, so
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that the way that it ended, I'm like, there could be more here, now that some decisions have been made. Yeah, there's room
yes.
for
Yeah, so and I think romance is a great space for that. Series don't work in every genre, but I feel like romance is definitely a space where sometimes you just want a little bit more. You're like, well, can I see what happens next? So
Right.
yeah, I'm excited about having just a few ideas stewing, and the summer for me is really going to be all about trying to like tighten up those ideas. It's a long process of drafting and then getting feedback and revising. And so hopefully by the end of this year, I'll have something, tangible for everybody. But I'm definitely working and writing.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds good. And as all of her social media and websites are at the bottom, please, everyone, follow Ashley, pick up a copy of the book, read it. If you love romance, share it with your friends. It is a good story from a different perspective, and I learned a lot about the music industry in it. And so that if you have any interest in that, or just to see how certain people navigate that, please pick this up and take a look. So Ashley, I'm going to let you go so you can enjoy the rest of your California sunshine. Other books to mention to you, to the audience, and also to let folks know what's coming up soon. So we'll be in touch. Ashley, continue to follow you. You continue to follow me, and yes, I'll definitely reach out when I see what else you've got going on. So thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was great. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. You have a great day.
You too. Bye.
All right, everybody. Now, if you are a lover of music like I am, this book, as I mentioned, is about a couple people in the music industry. Another book that I personally have been reading as well is Danielle Smith's Shine Bright. It is actually her personal history of Black women in pop. So it talks about Black women who are in pop music, but it's also a bit of a memoir because Danielle talks about her life and how she relates to these Black women in pop. And so it mentions people like Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight, people like that. So if you want to read something that talks about a woman who actually, Danielle is a music journalist. So she talks about things from that perspective. So this is a good book that I'm about halfway through, but I plan to finish that because I love talking about and reading about music. As far as the BGC Book Club, next week I'll be back with a book about Anne Lowe, who was a fashion designer to the stars. She actually designed the dress for Jacqueline Kennedy when she got married. So by her own design, by Piper Hughley. She will be here with us next week to discuss this historical woman, and we'll learn more about that and her world as a fashion designer. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be back with Our Gin by Diane McKinney Whetstone, which is a book about seniors who are living in a senior facility and some of the things that they are getting into and dealing with at that senior facility. So if you got any folks that are maybe a little bit older, or if you're one of those folks who's a little bit older, this one might interest you as well. So as always, everyone, thank you so much for joining the BGC Book Club. I am so excited to be here. So excited for each and every one of you who had an opportunity to watch or will watch or are watching later. And I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you again real soon. So you all have a good one. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.